purely from the freedom standpoint. This is like a weird social layer of monetizing culture and memes and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very like free market. It's very,
Yeah.
like people can just make their choices to get involved with it, potentially risk some money, or like create a moment in time and culture and be able to do it. So like to me, it's like ultimate libertarian freedom to be able to just use your finances however you want. And I love it.
Yeah, I've been spent quite a good amount of time on meme coins lately, but we've really seen like a lot of them kind of show up on Solana and stuff, and really that build like that whole narrative around Solana is built around it. And we've kind of seen that competition for L1s between Sol and ETH. I just kind of wanted to get some of your thoughts on how the ETH community is doing on the L1, and what could they be doing better, and what are they doing well?
There could be a lot of angles to this. I think Solana, it's very easy to launch memes on it, and it's because of that UX that I think they've absolutely nailed. It's very easy to open up something like Moonshot. It's easy to open up something like Phantom, and you have one blockchain to worry about. It moves fast. You're quickly onboarded through some like fiat on and off ramp, and then you can just like participate in a matter of like a minute or something. That's, I think, the biggest battle between Ethereum and Solana right now is just that UX. And there's always the trade-offs of centralization and decentralization, where you can have a really high throughput blockchain like Solana, and you might make some sacrifices on that like core ethos of decentralization. And that's okay. It's like, it's dependent on the user to make their choice of like, I'm okay with using something that might be perceived as slightly more centralized or something. And Ethereum definitely went down the path of saying, let's keep the blockchain really light and allow people to make their own experiences in L2s. And then culturally, I think Solana's done an excellent job facilitating this kind of meme culture and just kind of, like general posting culture of like, I have like a charged cultural thing, and I can go in Solana and it's done in 5 seconds. Whereas the experience right now is a little fragmented on Ethereum. And I think that there's been all those battles with, what is the Ethereum Foundation's role in facilitating this culture? I think they've been generally pretty hands off on, how does Ethereum present itself to the world? And I think that's why there's been the whole, in the Milady culture, Ethereum has embraced that a lot, because they see that that's like, that hits some kind of spiritual chord within, the crypto Twitter space or just in the community in general. And so you see Ethereum Foundation pushing a lot more of this culture. And I hope that they keep doing it and accelerating, because Ethereum is getting to a spot where it's scaling nicely. The fragmentation of liquidity is going to be solved, I think, really quickly, so that you don't have to bridge across all these L2s. It really feels like a single experience. And now I think Ethereum Foundation is being very strategic with pushing the culture to ensure that some of that posting from Solana can go straight over to Ethereum with ease.
You're listening to CFB Talks Digital Assets, the home of informed conversation about crypto for institutions building the future of finance, presented by CF Benchmarks. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode of CFB Talks Digital Assets. I'm Ken O'Deleger, Head of Content, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, Gabe Selby, who's Head of Research, and Mark Pilipchuk, who's our Research Analyst. Today, we are particularly on because we have another of our colleagues joining us, Andrew Koller, who is the founder, no less, of Inc., which is the Layer 2 unleashed by Kraken in December and has launched on the Optimism Superchain. So thanks a lot for joining us, Andrew.
Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, I'm excited.
Wonderful. So to get things on the road, we're going to obviously talk about how Inc. is bedding down, the upcoming key milestones on the roadmap ahead, and of course, what we see happening in the future. So I'm going to hand it over to Mark, our resident expert, DeFi DGen, to actually start the proceedings.
Well, it's great to have you here, Andrew. And kind of the first thing that I wanted to talk about was that the current state of Ethereum and where we sit, we've seen ever since the Denkun upgrade, kind of the network fees go down, and we've seen investors kind of get a little bit, or generally the sentiment around ETH turn around as the fee generation on chain has really shifted away from those layer 1s to L2s. So could you kind of talk to us a little bit about Ethereum's scaling roadmap and how we can see scalable revenue, or will we see scalable revenue for Ethereum from these layer twos? How will we kind of see that value start to flow?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that's just like in constant debate in Ethereum, and I think the general consensus is that there will the L1 will still like all the transactions that happen on L1 will start to be like slowly replaced by the blob space that gets posted down there. So I think it's like there's no silver bullet where it's like, okay, we're going to do this upgrade and all of a sudden the L1 is still sustainable with just blob space or something. It's like, with the Pectra one and then with ones happening later in the year, you have to do like all these different ingredients that are going to make it so that the L1 is still sustainable. It still is now. If all the activity shifts to L2s like overnight, in its current form, would it be like a sustainable revenue for validators? I don't know. Okay, if all activities switched over to the L2s tomorrow, like L1 probably isn't going to be sustainable with fees. So of all the things, down in the pipeline for Ethereum, you have to make sure that the validator count doesn't go bananas and like balloon up to tens of millions of validators. So I think like they're wanting to increase the effective balance of validators so that you can actually stake more on one. You don't have to have, like 50 validators for your funds. And then with blob space, there's a lot of people like working on kind of like blob space markets, maybe third-party ones that kind of like, different data availability layers that are going to like start pricing in some of these blobs. And there might be some more competition on how this gets posted down to the L1. Again, I think that the Pectra one is going to be like a really good data point to see like how the validator changes and kind of how the blob space evolves with pure data availability and putting some good throughput there. Also the max balance on the validators. I think there has to be a lot of data points that come from that, because it's just like kind of in theory right now and you can like infer it from testnet. And then that will probably inform the future upgrade to make sure that L1 is still sustainable. But I think to conclude it all though, I think the goal is definitely, at least in my mind, to make sure that the L1 is not, ideally not much happens on there, even though it's like, that's a cultural thing that you really have to undo, because there are sects of Ethereum that think that the L1 is where the adults are. Right. And it's like, okay, we're just going to stay there and we don't want to go to the L2s. So, I mean, that's the kind of the fun thing about a decentralized world. You will have those people that still want to use the L1. They want to like do the projects there. It's kind of we'll wait and see.
I wanted to ask you, in regards to Pectra, would you be able to just give us like a brief explainer to our listeners, kind of like why the Ethereum Foundation's wanting to do this upgrade? What are some of like the implications of it? Just kind of very high level. And then we can kind of go into the details of data availability, the pure DAS mechanism, all that stuff, and how that's going to impact, scalability and bottlenecks.
Overall, it's just like it's a UX and scaling upgrade, I think is like the theme of it, right? On the scalability, there's all kinds of computational limits that Ethereum's reaching, right? In any kind of peer-to-peer network, like as you start increasing the peers to, several millions and things like that, you're going to hit bottlenecks. And it's kind of like anything in software. Most companies in tech, they rewrite their software every like 7 years. That's kind of like the average. And, it's whether you have, you're scaling to tens of millions of users or your architecture from the early days is crap. And I think that's kind of like the theme of Pectra for scaling, is to make sure that you can handle the number of peers, especially if Ethereum wants to go to billions of users. Then you got to look forward into the future. It's not too far off from like maybe some kind of Bitcoin debates too, where that there's some roadblocks that it's going to hit in like whatever it may be, 2040 or something like that. So you got to start planning now. And I think that's kind of like what Ethereum is doing with this one for the first set of scalability. And then on the UX side, we're really excited about that on Inc, because to our point earlier of Solana versus Ethereum, the UX on Ethereum is not great. And so on Solana, you can perform so many actions with one transaction. It's very easy to just like get in, buy, you're out. In Ethereum, there's like on an ERC20, there's the approval functions where you have to approve a contract on behalf of, your transaction to spend some certain limit. With EIP 7702 in this, there's mixed reactions, but I think generally a good amount of hype of us being able to make EOA accounts, just standard addresses, behave like smart wallets. So we can actually do multiple actions on one. We can kind of remove all the bottlenecks of approval functions and multi-step things that people have to do. So for Inc, we're really excited about tailoring some one-click kind of DeFi experiences that would feel like you're doing something on Solana. Like if you buy a coin, you want it to go into yield, and then you want that yield to auto do something with it. Like you want it to go to some other protocol. You might be able to set up all those kind of like automated actions. And then with that UX, there could be some overlap with AI agents that are performing actions on your behalf. Like I think 7702 can unlock a lot. It's a little early days of experimentation, and it might take like a year or so for people to really unlock its potential. But we'll see.
It's really exciting stuff, everything that's being built on Ink. And one of the recent milestones that, we should definitely just jump into is the launch of USDTO. So how has the adoption been kind of what you expected with USDTO? And also, is this going to be kind of an application that's really going to get you the type of experience that you were just describing, on Ink, where everything's more seamless, it's better user interface, there's a better way to interact with Ethereum through Ink?
Yeah, USDT 0 came about really fast. It was like, this was something in early December where we were kind of working on a stablecoin strategy for Ink and figuring out like what do we want to support? What do we want to like maybe like have two major ones that we're kind of like working with, or, maybe 4 or 5. We were exploring a lot of options, and Kraken has always been really close to Tether and Palo. So we met and we jammed on this idea, and it happened in like a month. It was a lot of fun. And they had this in development with Layer 0, where that is kind of like the wormhole or the solver and relay network that allows for chain A to bridge easily over to chain B within like a minute or so. And then we made the settlement layer for a lot of that happening on Ink. So if you look at the contract for USDT 0, there's a ton of activity of it happening on Ink. And it's just like, it allows you to really tap into that interoperable liquidity that I think the Ethereum community really needs to solve, so that you don't feel like you're on an L2. It doesn't really matter which one you're on. The user can have their own choice to like, what's the best fee market? Where's the best yield? I don't have to worry about bridging. I can just send USDT 0 over to Ink easily from, whatever, chain A. And the activity, I think, has been awesome so far. Our strategy with Ink was not to like be perfectionists and wait like 2 years to line everything up and have like this perfect thing that goes out there. We really wanted to get it out there, engage with the community and any kind of institution and partner, and for them to then work with us after it's live and see like, okay, how can I leverage Kraken's user base, Ink, and build out something with my protocol or, my product. And USDT 0 has been one of those things where we launched it, and now there's protocols like Morpho, Moonwell, and others that are, having a lot of fun working with us, because a lot of these they focus heavily on USDC, and they want to work with us to enable their products to work with USDT, because there's, large markets in South America that primarily use USDT. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun kind of planning and cooking up some to be revealed things with them of like how they leverage USDT 0 on Ink.
Yeah. And then the other one that you just launched too, that was that partnership I saw with Securitize and Apollo. They had the private credit fund that will now be, tokenized, and I saw it was partnered with Ink. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and kind of what the plans are for RWAs and everything on Ink in the future?
Yeah, this one was fun because like it's kind of funny because I meme it a little bit because we try to set like the cypherpunk ethos and everything, but as we talked about before, included in that is the freedom to do anything, right? And so that should mean that institutions should feel very comfortable here. And this Securitize and Apollo partnership was key to that, of like, Kraken is going to absolutely help support this ecosystem for like whatever wants to be done on it. If you want to launch meme coins, go for it. If you want to do RWAs and have like insurance, tokenized insurance or whatever it may be, this is an awesome platform to do it. And we'll build the tools to help support that. So like one of those things is being able to attest that you have a Kraken account on Kraken, and you can attest on chain that you have gone through like a tier 4 kind of KYC process. And a lot of these protocols that require that, so say like a tokenized insurance, they're very comfortable with using that attestation to use their RWAs on Ink. Yeah, it's kind of like this holistic thing of like having Securitize, having attestations, having a pass-through KYC. And if people want to use a chain like that, they absolutely can. We will enable it.
That's really awesome. I think it's interesting to see how we're seeing ink kind of be utilized from both ends of the spectrum, right? From purely retail use cases and those types of applications all the way to more institutional flavors, right? So I wanted to kind of ask you in regards to those applications, someone who has probably like the best 10,000 foot view of ink and all these layer twos, what types of apps, what types of like sectors, activities that you're seeing on these chains, where do you see the users flocking to these types of segments on these layer twos? Is it more just DeFi? Are we going to see other? Do you think DeFi is kind of like the layup right now, and then we're going to kind of branch out to other areas? I just want to get your take.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to answer, but I think where like the data just shows is that obviously we were talking about memes earlier. That's like an awesome entry point. So it's kind of like this entry point of like a social layer, right? Like you see people having fun. You need to make sure that you make experiences that doesn't feel like this weird esoteric, like I'm getting into crypto, now I have to get all this knowledge. I think it's important because like you have applications like Moonshot and others that do an awesome job at onboarding people where they have no idea it's crypto in the back end. So I think our goal is to definitely push the UX to make everything feel like that. And so if we can have that kind of social entry point of like, I'm using this application, I'm having fun, I have no idea it's on-chain in the back end. And then you kind of, work through some good UX to show like there's a lot more you can do with the memes or the things that you've participated in on-chain. And then I think that's where there's this awesome funnel that you see happening where you see that you got these stable coins and some of the, yield strategy protocols have, like 12% on something. And then there's like an aha moment in the new user that's, they look at their savings account and they see like somewhere between like whatever it is, it oscillates between 1% to 4% or something like that. And then they see this on chain and then they're, it's just kind of like this domino effect of realizing DeFi is awesome. I can actually have a say in what I do with my finances. And if the yield drops on that, I can quickly pull it out, go to a different protocol. Of course, there's risks with all that, smart contract risk and everything. But yeah, I kind of deviated there. But I think the general gist is that the social and kind of like meme is like an awesome entry point. And then the DeFi layer and possibly like gaming and other things, like I really think that if we are going to billions of users and that end goal of getting billions of users on chain, then there has to be more beyond just I'm earning yield, right? Or I'm trading. And that's where like these social and gaming and other kind of layers start being built.
Yeah. So one thing that you said there is something that I really liked in talking about the user interfaces being kind of like the key for unlocking more activity, bringing more users into the ecosystem, right? So we've talked about this a lot in our podcast is kind of like, what do we need to see for mass adoption or greater adoption? And I think one thing that we all kind of agreed upon was kind of like the user interface and on these decentralized apps can be pretty clunky. And so it's really interesting to hear your thoughts on this and maybe like if we could kind of pivot the conversation to the Optimism Superchain and why you all chose that technology stack to build ink on. Is that kind of a critical piece to also get more users into this ecosystem because of the features that technology stack has?
Yeah, this was a fun choice because in the early days, we did a very holistic approach to it, right? We built on almost every stack out there just to kind of, get our hands dirty and see what is out there. We did ZK Sync, Polygon, the Superchain, Arbitrum, all of it. And I think every single stack has their merits and their trade-offs, but Optimism, like one of the key things was like a culture fit. And that was huge for us because we wanted to move really fast and we felt that Optimism was moving fast with their roadmap. And there's also the network effects to that where there was already a ton of liquidity and there's a lot of people building on that. And we got involved in the core developer community of Optimism pretty early. We saw the activity happening. We were able to just be kind of like an observer and see like how people were engineering, how people were building out the roadmap. And it felt like a good community to be a part of and join into those network effects. So, with the core focus of interoperability within that Superchain network effects, that felt like a really good UX thing for us to be able to latch onto and push, right? If there's already all these people using it and we're just kind of, we're bringing our, 10 of whatever it is now, 14 million clients, and we want to give them a good UX to get on chain, we might as well join in some good network effects that has a team, a very, very talented team that's building this interoperability. And then we can start incubating some projects on these features that aren't even in mainnet yet, and then be ready to go when these protocols and these builders want to launch something that, could be novel, with like shared liquidity across the superchain with interoperability, having your swap routes go from L2 to L2 without even the user knowing it, being able to use liquidity on some other L2 from Inc. and the user doesn't even know it. There was a lot of like technical and network effects and cultural decisions going into Optimism.
It's a great ecosystem, and it's kind of a situation where the rising tide lifts all boats. As more people get into this, we'll start to see more liquidity on chain and more users. One thing that we should also probably touch on is Ink's move towards decentralization. I saw you all have moved to stage 1. Huge congratulations on that. So with that, what does the roadmap kind of look like for stage 2, and what are the steps that need to be taken?
Yeah, stage 1 was a really fun push. We had aimed to get it when we launched, but with all of Kraken right now, we kind of all have this like high velocity acceleration mindset, and we might have moved a little too quick for that. So we still launched mainnet, but stage 1 wasn't ready yet. And so we pushed it into, when we did it just the other week in the middle of January. But yeah, I think it was a huge signal to, institutions, like any user at all. Like we take this seriously, and, we want to make sure that the security of the chain like feels up to snuff for other, like if an institution is using, let's say, Solana or something, they've done their due diligence and they know that, okay, this is sufficiently decentralized. It's not like I put $1 billion on it and all of a sudden it's going to like turn off, right? Solana sometimes does turn off, but that's kind of like just more an issue, and then it goes back on like an hour later. But that's what I see stage 1 as, is like kind of giving a signal to the world that we do take the security seriously, we take decentralization seriously, so that you don't have to rely on Kraken as the whole like operator of a sequencer, and we can get on this path to just having a trustless system, right? Like you can challenge the state with stage 1, you can withdraw easily now from stage 1 without having to worry. But stage 2 is now, that is not fully mapped out yet. I think like this is a huge group effort across all L2s and Optimism, because not even Optimism is ready for that yet. And so this is going to be probably, I would say, like another year or so of collaboration and development, with the Inc team being a part of the core working group. We recently got elected to the Security Council, so we'll help inform like the decisions that go forward with stage 2. I think it's way too early to tell like what is the concrete path to get there, other than we got a lot of work ahead of us. Even though Inc, we will be focusing entirely on like our products and like our UX, we still do allocate like X amount of hours a month to participate in Optimism governance.
Now, for stage 2, I know there's no concrete maybe roadmap or milestones that, you envision for achieving it, but is there anything that you could share off the top of your mind as how someone like yourself, someone who's very into the weeds of the stuff and building, massive projects, on some key objectives that stage 2 needs to kind of touch on for further decentralization?
I can't say too much yet of like what are the key things. Like once you have the permissionless fault proofs in stage 1, that's where anybody can challenge the state of a single operator of the sequencer. Stage 2, like we got to start pushing into, okay, how can more people start participating in decentralized sequencing, right? Which means that Kraken or any other entity that's running an L2 isn't the sole operator, and we have to get into now like the peer-to-peer network of, we're proposing blocks in a decentralized way. And I think with all the kind of based and native sequencing talks that the Ethereum Foundation has been kind of pushing, that has to be core to this. And Optimism recently did a commitment to saying like, we're going to participate in this working group. And now, it's like however many, probably first half of this year and even into the latter half of the year, that we have to decide like, how is the OP stack going to be able to propose blocks in a decentralized way?
Andrew, just another theme. We are obviously a benchmark administrator, which by default puts us more on a path to facing the institution rather than the consumer or the individual. How do you sort of like envisage, generally speaking, the institutional piece of Inc. developing? I think there is a clear example in recent history with the Apollo Credit Fund coming onto the Inc. Chain, as well as a couple of other chains, I believe, being accessible that way. Is that a kind of model going forward as to how you envisage institutional participation happening?
Yeah, I think Apollo and Securitize is a great start, a great example of just one flavor of it, though, right? Like the RWA space seems very like primitive still, and I think that there will, as long as these platforms and people like Securitize and others are starting to like really heavily engage with regulators and say, yeah, you know what, we want to take all these like normal traditional finance things and just throw them on chain. That's just going to keep evolving, and we want to obviously help enable that. But then the other is like, there's so many products out there that are helping facilitate the self custody in a more institutional way, right? Like you have Gnosis Safe, you have other people that are developing products that are maybe more deep in the contract level, where you have a multi-sig on the contract, but it's a multi-sig on like one-click strategies for institutions. So I think that there will be a lot more of those things evolving, where yeah, you have the multi-sig contract, and then behind it, there's just like strategies for like whatever you want to pick going across all of these DeFi applications. So institutions can feel like very comfortable that this multi-sig backed by 10 different contracts for strategies is heavily audited, and all they have to do is just kind of come together and click a button, and their funds are now participating in LPing and yield and all that. I think it's comforting to see that the UX topic is, for institutions, for consumers, for anybody, is like top of mind for a lot of Ethereum right now. And I think institutions will be super happy to, maybe a year or two from now with 7702 out and others that like, have $100 million. All you have to do is click a button and congrats, you're in a pretty large strategy.
That seems to sort of underline a really key point, critical point, because it seems to me, even in my sort of ignorant state, it seems to me that obviously the technology is there, but the infrastructure, perhaps the sort of like surveillance, if you like, or surveillable data. The regulators don't necessarily need to see everything, but they need to basically have a paper trail for if things go wrong. I think that's what you seem to be saying, is that sort of the potential infrastructure needs to go in place first, or is it there already? Is that how you sort of you're sort of like visualizing it?
I think that there will be very auditable, like, human level explanations of what all of this is doing. And then of course, like blockchain is the most transparent thing ever. You can just like have like an AI just start explaining like, okay, this institution clicked on this strategy and it did all these things over the course of a year, and then it just spits it out in a nice like auditable report. We'll definitely see stuff like that, where you don't have to rely on like a team of 50 people going and looking at databases and how you moved money over the last year. It's just like click a button, here's the whole report, and it's easy.
Just kind of as a final question before we wrap up here, we have ETH Denver coming up here soon, and I'm sure you have a whole bunch of other launches planned on Inc. in the meantime. What's kind of top of mind for you, and what are you excited about in the near future?
Well, first at ETH Denver, it's we have a 5-day hacker house there. We have some core builders that have signed up that we're actually like paying for hotel and travel, and they're going to hack with us for 5 days. But we're also encouraging like any infrastructure partner or big player in the space, like there's a lot of them that are going to stop by, Uniswap stopping by, Chainlink and others, to kind of like show developers like what they have. Like Uniswap has the V4 hooks that just went out. A lot of really crazy like real world applications can be made with those. So that hacker house is there, and definitely if you're in ETH Denver, you can show up. You don't have to be registered. You can show up and take a look at what's going on. And then internally on the Inc. side, I think we are focusing on these 3 pillars of UX, security, and privacy. And for these probably 6 months, first half of the year, UX is our core thing. Like we really want to make this feel like some kind of neobank on chain, that you're going to a one-stop shop and you don't feel that you have to use all these tools to connect to applications and, do all these approvals or whatever it may be. It's just like you're in a single place. you have your single buttons, and you can manage everything with your wealth. You'll see a lot of that, at least on the internal kind of like product and engineering side of Ink releasing. Of course, on the chain level, gosh, there's so many BD and partnerships and things and people that are building there that I can't talk about yet. But it's pretty much every week at this point. We have some awesome people joining in the Ink ecosystem.
So shout out to everybody at ETH Denver. Be sure to go check out Andrew and all the fellow hackers that will be doing some interesting stuff there. Thank you again, Andrew, for coming on the pod. It was a real pleasure and hope to have you back soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was fun.
Really appreciate it. A massive eye-opener.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
I think we all learned something from it, and I think a lot of our viewers and listeners learned something from it as well. So if you like that kind of content, you can find tons of other episodes of CFB Talks Digital Assets wherever you listen to or watch podcasts. For all our other content, it's cfbenchmarks.com. We'll see you guys again for another episode of CFB Talks Digital Assets. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to CFB Talks Digital Assets. This recording is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice.
This recording is not intended to persuade or incite you to buy or sell any financial products noted within, including but not limited to exchange-traded funds, mutual funds, equities, other instruments that reference any index provided by CF Benchmarks Limited, or crypto assets. Any commentary, interviews, and discussions are opinions only and should not be considered a personalized recommendation. Please contact your financial advisor or professional before making an investment decision. Note, some of the underlying instruments cited within this recording may be restricted to certain customer categories in certain jurisdictions.